Oklahoma. Yep, Purcell.
You don't know where Purcell, Oklahoma is located? South of Norman on I-35.
Okay, you're in good shape now.
Well, thank you. Would you tell the congregation?
For some reason, the stream wasn't sending it to where it needed to go.
Ah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of that last couple of weeks.
Everybody called us, we got another picture, we had the picture of that right there, we thought it was kind of ironic. Really? Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, Pat. How are you? Mine is a frog here?
Sure. Just didn't want to tell you that.
Do what?
I just didn't want to tell you that.
Yeah.
I'll try to remember,
So, Ron, did you get with Cliff? Did you get with Cliff on the...
No, it'll be this week.
Okay.
No, so I didn't have a chance to Friday. I don't know if they looked Friday or not. I didn't even try.
I don't know.
Yeah. But no, it'll be this week for see.
like 15, so that tells you how much she's improved. This is also a picture that she took.
John and Nancy.
Dragging her feet.
They'll be here. Well, Isaac probably will. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe Leanne's not feeling well today.
Too much turkey dinner.
Too much turkey dinner.
We didn't have her turkey either, because none of us cared that much about it. First time I didn't have it. Like a really good ham. Like a really good ham. We had ham.
That's what we do.
I did something simple. Sam's has these small turkey breasts that are stuffed with dressing and cranberries, and they're six. Yeah, they're 6 to a box, and the turkey is raw, so you have to put it in the oven and bake them. But put a little gravy on top of them, or cranberry sauce, whatever you like. You know, they're delicious.
That would feed my crowd.
Yeah. And then I was at Costco, and Costco had a whole turkey breast stuffed with cranberries, dried cranberries and dressing. And I bought one of them. And of course, it was already cooked. You just had to heat it up, but it took an hour to heat it up at the temperature that it said, and it was really good. So. The only thing I made, and I was going to bring that recipe for you, but I forgot to bring that. I'll get it, though, on the turnips. And so the only thing I really made this time was a apple cake.
Apple cake?
Yeah, and it is delicious.
The longer it sits, the better it gets.
Yeah, I may bring one of those to our Christmas party. On the 11th.
That's December?
Yeah.
Where's that?
That's at the Sharber's Clubhouse on Broadway. Yeah. You didn't see the email message John sent out? What was? Well, you need to start cleaning out your email.
I'll agree. I couldn't care less about I'm talking about all of them I get.
All of them you get?
Yeah. From every word.
Well, I don't get that many emails. I put most of mine as spam. Spam's always good.
Just a little bit like ham.
5 minutes late.
4 minutes late.
I said it tastes a little bit like ham.
Well, I thought maybe we'd have a couple more people come in, but I guess not. We're going to be light today.
On their dinner.
I guess.
Way too much.
So it is time to start, And we were looking at some of the lessons learned from chapters 13 and 14. And I told you we had finished that up this morning, and we'll look at the questions of chapter 14, then we'll get into chapter 15. I don't have any new announcements except I overheard John talking to Jensen, and I guess most of the Purcell congregation is affected with the coronavirus, and so there are several of them in the hospital. As you know, that's where Katie's dad preaches, and so certainly want to remember them. But other than that, I don't have any other announcements. So, Chuck, you want to lead us in prayer this morning?
Beloved Father, we're so thankful that we have the privilege of gathering together such as this to study thy divine word. We pray that our hearts and mind will be open to the things that we study, that we can apply those things to our lives if need be. We're thankful, Father, for Dale and his leading of our discussion. And we're thankful for your love for us and for the love of Christ. We pray, Father, that the things that we do today will be in accordance with your divine will. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. As I said, we're looking at lessons learned from chapters 13 and 14, and I need to turn my cell phone off so it won't ring. There we go. And we had stopped at the third item that I wanted to look at, because we have a number of scriptures up there, but we're not going to look at all those scriptures, so don't get alarmed. I'll tell you which ones we're going to look at. Because the idea is to find out exactly what the New Testament has to say about chapters 13 and 14. Remember, everything that's in chapters 13 and 14 of Deuteronomy was dealing with false prophets, false teachers, and pagan mourning and pagan customs that were to be forbidden. So the question is, does this apply to us in the New Testament? And the obvious answer is yes, it does. And so we need to recognize that the New Testament is chock full of warnings against those who teach false doctrines. First off, we'll look at Jesus in Matthew, the 7th chapter, verses 15 through 20. And Ron, we'll start with you on that if we could. We'll skip what Paul said in the Philippian brethren, but we'll look at what Peter said in 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. And Florence, we'll let you read that. And then we'll skip John in 1 John chapter 2, 26. But also we could look at 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, because all of these deal with that. And we could look at several other scriptures, but these will get the idea of what the New Testament is trying to teach. So let's look at Matthew 7, verses 15 through 20.
Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them.
Florence, 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 11.
Okay. But there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you. Am I reading the right place?
Yes.
Halfway through. Even as there will be false teachers among you, you will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who brought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. By covetousness they will exploit you with deceptive words. For a long time their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. For God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. And did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of the 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly. And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptation and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment, and especially those who walk according to the flesh and the lust of uncleanness and despise authority. They are presumptuous, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignitaries. Whereas angels, who are greater in power and might, do not bring a reveling accusation against them before the Lord.
Okay, and we could, those are two areas, what Peter had to say, what Jesus had to say, but we could look at what John had to say, we could look at what Paul had to say. But all of these things these people warned of the dangers of people who teach words that have been revealed by God, or that have not been revealed by God, I should say. Moses' instructions, as well as the Lord's and the apostles of the New Testament, then, help us understand what our view of these men and women should be. The fourth item is the souls of men are at stake when considering whether words are truthfully or erroneous. God redeemed man from bondage, and this is not to be taken lightly. This goes back to Deuteronomy, the 13th chapter, verse 5, which I'll read real quick, just as a reminder. It says, "But that prophet or that dreamer of dreams that shall be put to death, because he has spoken in order to turn you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to entice you from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. So ye shall put away the evil from your midst." But we'll not look at Ephesians 1:7, but we will look at 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, Chuck.
18 and 19?
Yes.
Knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot.
So we just need to remember that that our souls are at stake when considering whether words are truthful or whether they are erroneous. Next, what should the disciples of the Lord do when confronted with error? Yeah. Obviously, the first thing we need to do is be aware that people will indeed try to teach us error. During the days of the apostle, there were people who were claimed to be false, or claimed to be Christ. Obviously, they were false. There were people who claimed to be apostles, and obviously they were false. There were people who claimed to be brethren of Christ. And even those who were writing letters who claimed inspiration. All of these things we know. Let's look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 2, Jack.
Not to be soon shaken in none more trouble, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come.
This is what the Apostle Paul was saying to the church at Thessalonica, that there would be some people that would be pretending to, or claiming that they were apostles like us, but they were not. Look at Galatians, the 1st chapter, verse 6, Pat.
"I marvel that you are turning away so soon from him who called you in the grace of God, of Christ, to a different gospel."
Yeah, this was the church of Galatia, and obviously, yeah, Jack.
What was that guy's name in Waco? David Koresh?
Yeah, I think. Hello, John.
He claimed to be Jesus, didn't
Yeah. And there were a lot of those people, and even people today, claim to be special prophets or special disciples leading people astray. And I won't go into naming some individuals. I could think of a few individuals that I think would apply to that, but I'll just not name them. But also, we see in Acts the 18th chapter, verse 27, Donna.
And when he wanted to go across to Acacia, the brother encouraged him and wrote to the disciples to welcome him. When he had arrived, he greatly helped those who had believed through grace.
So what Moses said back in Deuteronomy 13:5, which I read just a moment ago, was that we are to put away the evil from among us. The Christian is instructed to do the following. First, we are instructed to identify the person or persons teaching error. Look at what Timothy said. Turn to Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 20. And then, Ron, if you'll turn to 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 17 and 18.
Of whom is thy mark? And Alexander, whom I have delivered unto Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme.
Okay, this was the Apostle Paul, obviously, talking to Timothy, and he named specifically Alexander. And this is the same thing. I mean, we could look at scriptures. I didn't write down the scriptures, but we are to mark those individuals that are promoting error. Let's look at 2 Timothy chapter 2, 17 and 18, Ron.
Their message will spread like cancer. Hymenaeus and Philetus are of this sort, who have strayed concerning the truth, saying that the resurrection is already past, and they overthrow the faith of some.
So here again, the Apostle Paul named two other men who were causing error. And he specifically brought them to Timothy's attention and instructed Timothy, obviously, to watch out for them and to make sure that these people are not allowed to promote error. And so in essence, Paul was marking them, identifying them. The second thing Christians are to do, though, is we are to expose that error. Look at Ephesians, the 5th chapter, verse 11, Lawrence.
And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them.
Okay, and 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 16 through 18, which Ron read 17 and 18. But let's go ahead and read that again, Chuck. 16 through 18, 2 Timothy chapter 2.
Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. But shun profane and idle babblings, for they will increase to more ungodliness, and their message will spread like cancer. Hymenaeus and Philetus are of this sort, who have strayed concerning the truth, saying that the resurrection is already past, and they overcome the faith of some.
And so you see that word diligent. Paul said, be diligent. Make haste. Don't procrastinate, but be quick and be sure of those things that you're doing in service to God. The next thing is that we as Christians are to give the false teacher no greeting. Look at 2 John verses 9 through 11, Jack.
Whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house, nor greet him, for he who greets him shares in his devil deeds.
And then we look at what, the next thing is that we are to avoid such people after an attempt to reconcile them to the truth. Paul talking to Titus in chapter 3, verses 10 and 11. Pat?
Reject a divisive man after the first and second admonition, knowing that such a person is warped and sinning before being self-condemned.
Okay. So, the question we can always ask is, what if the false teacher is a family member? Moses dealt with that in chapters 13 and 14, that even a family member should be marked and identified. This goes back to Deuteronomy 13th chapter, verses 6 through 9. Let's go ahead and read that, Donna.
If your brother's son, or your son or daughter, or the wife you cherish, or your friend who is as your own soul, entice you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, whom neither you nor your fathers have known. Other gods of the peoples who are around you, near you, are far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end. You shall not yield to him or listen to him, and your eye shall not pity him, nor shall you fear or conceal him. You shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him, put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people.
So if we take that to the New Testament then and see what Jesus had to say, Jesus said that no one should stand in our way of serving God. Matthew 10, verses 37 and 38, John.
He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that thinketh not his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me.
So again, the idea is that no one should stand in our way when it comes to serving God, because it's God first. What if many people in the church begin to accept error and draw away the hearts of the disciples? I should have put this up here. There we go. And so let's see what Moses had to say again, going back to Deuteronomy the 13th chapter, verses 12 through 15. Ron?
If you hear someone in one of your cities, which the Lord your God gives you to dwell in, saying, corrupt men have gone out from among you and enticed the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which we have not known, then you shall inquire, search out, and ask diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination was committed among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it, all that is in it, and its livestock with the edge of the sword.
Okay, and so we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 17 through 22, and this is what the Apostle Paul was saying to the church at Corinth. Remember, Corinth was the city was a very corrupt city. A lot of idolatry worship in the city and everything, and so there were a lot of problems in this church that Paul had to deal with in the two letters, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. But let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 17 through 22. Florence?
Now, giving these instructions, I do not praise you, since you come together not for the better, but for the worse. But first of all, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and in part I believe it. For there must also be fractions among you, that those who are approved may be recognized among you. Therefore, when you come together in one place, it is not to eat the Lord's Supper. For in eating, each one takes his own supper ahead of others, and one is hungry, and the other is drunk. What? Do you not have houses to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God, and shame those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I do not praise you.
So as Christians today, we need to follow the same principles that Moses emphasized to the Israelites, and also that Paul emphasized to the Corinthian brethren. And that is that we are to identify error, we are to identify the false teachers and expose them. We should give no greeting to them and avoid after an attempt to reconcile them to truth. And avoid prejudicial treatment of these people due to friendships or family relationships. And sometimes that's difficult to do, but if we have friends, relatives, co-workers that are causing us or trying to cause us to go in the opposite direction than serving Christ, then we must avoid them. Christians should learn to abhor and be disgusted with error. Deuteronomy the 14th chapter, verses 1 and 2. Chuck?
You are the children of the Lord your God. You shall not cut yourselves, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. And the Lord has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth.
So Paul taught something similar to the church at Rome in Romans the 12th chapter verse 9, Jack.
Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good.
So we should indeed abstain from all forms of evil, and that takes us back to Deuteronomy 14 verses 1 and 2, which was just read. So Pat, I'm going to ask you to turn to 2 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 22.
How could you do that? There's only three
There's
chapters.
only 3 in this.
Thought I was gonna have to read it, and I couldn't find it.
Oh, I guess that is true, didn't I? Well, what did I do here?
Prepared and, okay.
Yeah,
Find it.
thank you. It's that bad typewriter, isn't it? Well, let me look at the scripture here. I think I know where it is.
And there's not a 22 in
First Thessalonians 5:22, I think, but
Yeah, I think it's 1 Thessalonians. My finger got too quick on me.
no, that's not it either.
Yeah, First Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 22.
Yeah, that's it.
Verse 22,
Yeah, 1 Thessalonians 5:22.
okay. Abstain from every form of evil.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking out.
One more time.
Well, we did spend a little time there because of my finger being too fast.
There's one thing we should do, if someone's trying to steer us wrong, we need to call them out, and the fact of the matter is if they cause us to stumble, they put their own soul into it. So
Well-
what are they doing?
You are exactly right, Jack, and we need to learn the lesson that Jesus Christ demonstrated when Satan approached him and tempted him 3 different times. One, he said, man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of God's mouth. And this was the message that he kept telling Satan, that you must stay with the word of God. And so when someone does try to lead us astray, we should give a biblical answer to it. And if we don't know the answer, then the best thing to do is say, let me think on that and study a little bit, and I'll get back to you. It's better to do that than to say, well, this is what I think, or this is how I feel, because chances are we may do that out of not having complete knowledge of what God had to say on the subject and be a little bit misleading. That's my thoughts on the subject. Anybody have any comments?
Or it's like this, whenever I was teaching that Bible class, and one of the students asked me something, and I said, I don't know, I'll have to get back, find that for you. And he said, wouldn't it be funny if I knew the answer? And you don't.
This is why sometimes when you folks ask me questions in the class, I'll say, well, let me study that a little bit and I'll get back to you, because while I may have a pretty good idea of what I want to say, I'd like to know what God has to say about it and what the Bible has to say. Chuck?
Matthew 28, 18 through 20 sticks in my mind that these have to be hard-hearted rejectors that we turn away.
Yes.
If we can get a conversation with them to teach them, then we are to teach them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But if they won't listen, then we are to turn away from them.
Right. Yeah, eventually we will indeed have to just accept the fact that we're not going to win. I remember when I was stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, I was studying with a young lady, and she had a friend that was a Jehovah's Witness. So every time I would study with her, she would come back with something that her Jehovah's Witness friend was studying with her as well. And I finally told her, I said, look, you're going to have to decide, either study with me or study with her. You can't do both and keep being confused. And she chose her friend instead of me. But, and so I no longer made an effort to study with her. But Chuck is exactly right. As much as we can, we should make every effort to try to convert someone and study with them as long as they're open-minded and willing to study. If they're no longer open-minded or refuse to open their mind, this is exactly what Jesus was talking about with these people, some of these Jews that refused to open their mind and see the truth. So, all right.
Go on and talk to somebody who will listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's look at the questions on chapter 14. Number 1, I said, finish the verse, for you are a holy people to the Lord your God.
And the Lord instructed you to be people of himself, a special treasure of all people who are on the face of the earth.
Okay, and I said, name some of the animals the people were allowed to eat.
You can go to them.
Scale, big bird, ox, sheep, goat, deer, all with cloven hooves.
Yes, and chewed a cud. Yes. Deuteronomy 14:4. Name some of the animals the people were not allowed to eat.
Camel hair, rock hacks, blood, dead flesh, carcasses.
Everything that,
Because it has cloven hooves in some
That
countries.
rock has
yeah, everything that had one but not both. Some chewed a cud. The rabbit, for example, chews a cud, but they don't have cloven hooves. The camel has cloven hooves, but doesn't chew a cud.
I thought they did.
Maybe it's the opposite.
Camel does, right.
It's a pig
Yeah.
that has cloven hoof and don't chew.
Yeah, pig has cloven hooves, but doesn't chew a cud. That's,
The rock hacks, is that some type of rabbit?
I don't know.
Jesus knew about all that anyway.
And there's several kinds of birds you can eat.
Several kinds. Which kinds of birds were the people not allowed to eat? Well, several kinds. Deuteronomy 14, verse 12.
I'm glad Jesus knew all that stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
These are the vultures, the buzzards, the red tide.
What were the people supposed to set aside each year?
The tithes of their gain.
Okay. Deuteronomy 14, verse 22. And why at the end of every 3 years did the people bring a tenth of all the produce for that year and store it within their gates?
For the poor and the Levites.
Okay.
Stranger and fatherless.
All right. Deuteronomy 14, verse 29. Okay, so let's look at chapter 15 then. This is the sabbatical year and caring for the poor. Verses 15, or chapter 15, verses 1 through 11. And so we'll break it down. We'll read verses 1 through 5 of chapter 15 and talk about that for just a moment. Donna?
At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a remission of debts. This is the manner of remission. Every creditor shall release what he has loaned to his neighbor. He shall not exact it of his neighbor and his brother, because the Lord's remission has been proclaimed. From a foreigner you may exact it, but your hand shall release whatever of yours is with your brother. However, there will be no poor among you, since the Lord will surely bless you in the land which the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance to possess. If only you listen obediently to the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments which I am commanding you today.
They didn't pay you in 7 years, they're going to pay you anyway.
That's true. The instructions for carrying out the sabbatical year or the year of release are found all the way back in Exodus, the 23rd chapter, verses 10 through 13. Let's go ahead and look at that. John, you have that?
In 6 years thou shalt sow the land, and shalt gather in the fruits thereof. But the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still, that the poor of the people may eat. What they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat. In like manner thou shalt deal with thy vineyards and with thy olive yard. 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the 7th day thou shalt rest, that thine ox and thine ass may rest, and thy son of thy handmaid and a stranger, they may be refreshed. And in all things I have said unto you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of the other gods, neither let it be heard out of thy mouth.
So first off, we see here that Moses tells the Israelites that they could work for 6 years, work the land for 6 years, and then the 7th year the land had to rest. He further instructs the people not to exact money from a neighbor that had borrowed during this time. The borrower would have no way of repaying debts during the year of rest. Yes, Chuck?
There's some interpreters that look at that as on the 6th year, you pay your tax, you pay it up through 6 years, but 7th year, the land rests. So the wealthy is not to collect from the poor that 7th year. But then they pick it up again on the 8th year when they can sow their crops again, which is an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it is. So, I guess the point is, though, that even though during this 7th year that they were not to collect any money, this did not release the debtor permanently from his or her debt. He was given a year to recover from his labors and debts. And we see that a little bit now in politics and everything. You have all these people that are renting right now, and the government said no, the renters or the owners of those apartments and homes and stuff that are renting cannot collect the rent during this period of time because the people were not able to work. So it's a little bit similar, I guess, but the poor were not allowed to go hungry. God has always expressed concern over those who are less fortunate throughout the Scriptures. Look at what the Apostle Paul had to say in Galatians, the 2nd chapter, and verse 10.
They desired only that we should remember the poor, the very thing which I also was eager to do.
Okay. Now, let me emphasize that Paul was talking to the church at Galatia. There are many religious organizations, to include many churches of Christ, that feel the need to go out and help all the homeless and the poor in the world. I've yet to see where that benefits the church itself, because you don't see an increase of these people coming in and accepting Christ. But what Paul is talking about is to the church at Galatia, and the poor in that church should be taken care of. We have a responsibility here. But you go and you look at further and everything, and Paul was talking to, I believe it was Timothy, might have been Titus, that if the poor or the widow has family members that can take care of them, then they should take care of them. They should not be a burden on the church. The church should only take care of those who have no one that can help them. And again, I would emphasize that this is dealing with the church. And so we have a responsibility with every member in this congregation that if there is someone that has a need, we should help them. And we have done that in this congregation. And we'll continue to do that when we verify an individual truly has needs. But at the same time, as elders, we do talk to those individuals, or that individual, whatever it may be, to ensure that indeed they have no other opportunity or access to funds. Anybody have any comments or want to add anything to that? Yes, Chuck.
Yeah, I have a comment here that God's system guarded against extreme wealth and extreme poverty.
Okay, good point. Any other comments? All right, so let's look at the next verses then. And this is the poor will never cease out of the land. Now, this is verses 6 through 11. Let's see. Florence, I guess this is up to you now.
For the Lord your God will bless you just as he promised you. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. You shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you.
Through 11.
If there is among you a poor man of your brethren, within any of the gates in your land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart nor shut your hand from your poor brother. But you shall open your hand wide to him and willingly lend him significant for his need, whatever he needs. Be very 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and your eye be evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry out to the Lord against you, and it becomes sin among you, you shall surely give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him. Because for this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your works, and in all to which you put your hand. For the poor will never cease from the land, therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor and your needy in your land.
All right, so when you look at these verses and everything, it's interesting to note that Moses' observation about the economic standing of some, first off, he states the poor will never cease out of the land. We also need to see what Jesus had to say in Matthew the 26th chapter and verse 11, Chuck.
For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not have always.
So as there will always be very rich people, middle class and lower classes, there will also be those who are poor. Why these people are poor is not under consideration here. We don't see that in the scriptures. The Old Testament indicates great conviction against those who mistreat or overlook the poor among them. Let's look at some of those verses. Amos, the 2nd chapter, verse 7, Jack.
They pant after the dust of the earth which is on the head of the poor, and pervert the way of the humble. A man and his father go into the same grove to defile my holy name.
Okay, and also, Jack, look at chapter 4, verse 1, and Pat, I'll have you read 5, verse 11.
Hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who are on the mountain of Samaria, who oppress the poor, who oppress the needy, and who say to your husbands, bring wine, let us drink.
5, verse 11, Pat.
Therefore, because you tread down the poor and take grain taxes from him, though you have built houses of hewn stone, yet you shall not dwell in them. You have planted pleasant vineyards, but you shall not drink wine from them.
Okay, turn to Amos 8, verses 4 through 6, Donna.
Hear this, you who trample the needy, do away with the humble of the land, saying, when will the new moon be over, so that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath that we may open the wheat market, to make the bushel smaller and the shekel bigger, and the sheep with dishonest scale, so as to buy the helpless with money, and the needy for a pair of sandals, and that we may sell the refuse of the wheat.
Okay, so all of this deals with the fact that there is great conviction against those who mistreat or overlook the poor among them. The New Testament also talks about the need to care for the poor. Jesus said that caring for the poor was a matter of personal perfection. Matthew 19:21, John.
Jesus said unto him, if thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come follow me.
Okay, so people both in Jesus' day, also the apostles, were concerned with those who were poor. Let's look at Luke, the 19th chapter, verse 8, Ron.
Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor, and if I've taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold.
All right. And then John 12, verse 5, Florence.
Why was the fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?
All right, and then we go and we look and see what the apostles had to say about the subject in Acts 2:43, Chuck.
Then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles.
Was that verse 43?
Yeah.
Okay.
44.
Maybe it's
All
44.
who believed were together and had all things in common.
Okay, good. Yeah, I should have added that verse to it. So thank you.
And maybe 45.
And 45?
Yeah, they sold their possessions and goods.
Yeah,
divided
they sold
among
Yeah,
all.
there we go. That's the verse I was looking for. I just didn't write it down here, so thank you.
Possessions and goods,
Yeah.
and divided them among as anyone had need.
Yeah, there we go.
Did you prepare this late at night?
Huh?
Did you prepare this late at night?
I must have.
Yeah, 'cause Romans 15, 26 through 26.
What's wrong with it? Oh,
I wondered about that.
yeah, that is kind of bad, isn't it? Man, I must have prepared this late at night.
Oh, really early in the morning.
I gotta go back and look at that, because I obviously had something in mind when I wrote that.
I have a question.
Yes,
I know God helped those who help themselves. There's a lot of poor people that are poor people because they are sluggards.
well, that's very true.
And those we're not supposed to help.
But,
But, so, and some of the stuff like, God made some rich, like, who's the richest man in the world, had all the wives.
yeah, the Apostle Paul makes the statement that he gives to us so that we may give to others.
That's true.
Solomon.
But,
But is that the ones that's deserving, or is that who just, bums on the street corner that are full of drugs?
the point is, people, first off, I believe that people need to be content with what they have. If we desire what someone else has, then we are sinning. But we need to work. God expects us to work and not be a sluggard.
That's the message I'm trying to find out
Yeah.
about helping the poor.
Yeah.
Some you help them, you just spoil them. You make them dependent on you. Some you try to help them out from being poor, and they're going straight to the liquor store.
I remember.
So the message
Well,
in here
there's
is
a
I'm
passage
looking
that
for.
says if they won't work, they don't eat.
That's true. I remember when Cal was here, you see these people on the street corners all the time and everything, and he stopped at one. He said, I've got about 6 hours of work at my house, and he said, I'll pay you $10 an hour to do that. And the guy says, I make more money standing on the street corner, and refuse to work. And you see a lot of these people. I was out Friday, and down on Western at Memorial, there was a lady there, had a sign, says, I have 2 children. Please help. God bless. I drive up Memorial to Penn. I was going to Sam's, and there was a gentleman there with 1 son and had a sign that said, I have 2 children. Please help for money for food and hotel and gas. And both of them were very healthy people.
I see a lot of healthy people out there.
Yes.
There's one on the sidewalk, but I don't remember exactly what it was, but someone asked me for some money to get something. That's what I said, I'll take it right there. He told me where to go. It starts with an H.
There are a few people I will look at and I will try to help. There's one individual I see out there from time to time that he's missing a leg completely and he's walking with crutches. Now somebody like that I know has a difficult time getting a job, and I will help someone like that.
There's one we keep helping at Memorial and Parkway. We've got the bridge. He's an older guy, and walks with a cane. He's got his foot is turned completely
His
around.
legs
It's
twisted.
twisted all the way around sideways. Well,
We can't pass him up. He's
He's
older, and you know he can't be working.
We get people coming to the congregation here, and one gentleman's come twice now, and I'll usually pull a little bit of money out of my pocket, but I just tell them that we're not taking anything out of our contribution to help you, and if I know it's an individual that travels from religion to religion getting money, then I send them on their way.
Tell him to go to 3rd and Boulevard, that church there on the corner. They do that. They have to.
Yeah. Well, that was our second bell, so we better stop, and we'll